So in this segment, we're going to talk for 20 minutes about early stage. So that was all about, enterprise and growth stage and what changes as you get big. In this one, we're going to talk about the beginning. So show us again, how many of you are at an early stage startup? So pre-product market fit, whatever that means. Yep, okay, good. Yeah. Yep. All right, so let's start with introductions.
Hi, I'm Cindy Alvarez, and despite the panel, I'm currently at Microsoft through no fault of my own, but I spend a lot of time talking to early stage startups, and that is where I spent the first 10 or so years of my career.
I'm Tristan. I am the... I don't even know what I do, so it's really refreshing. It's like I attempt to coordinate these many number of meetups around the world, but I have no actual authority over any of them. So the Circle has like 80,000 people all over the world, about 80 different meetups, ranging from Ramallah to Caracas to Moscow to
Jakarta.
Oh, yes, awesome. This will be interesting. Okay.
In the house.
In the house. So I attempt to herd these people and get them to exchange information. And that is my nonprofit pre-founding awesomeness job that I like to do that actually relates to this conversation.
So I'm Patrick Vlasiewicz. I, along with Greg Cooper, the really good-looking long-haired hippie over there.
Yeah.
We wrote the two books, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Customer Development, and then The Lean Entrepreneur. So right now, these days, actually, I'm actually cut down on my travel and consulting stuff. And so I'm actually working on two projects, one of which is probably the more legitimate startup, another was sort of just a micro business. That's really keeping me super busy.
Well, that's interesting. So what's the difference between a startup and a micro business?
Well, so I'll even tell you, I don't know.
No, go, man.
So one of them is called Paleo Hacks. If you guys are into the paleo diet, you guys might have been on the site actually. We'll get a fair amount of traffic and do some content marketing and affiliate marketing. The difference really is it's a fun little business. There's good margins and things like that. That said, it's not going to be a venture scalable business. If like you gave me $1 million, I wouldn't know what to do. I guess I could buy traffic and things like that, but it's not a legitimate. At least the way I look at my other project. Yeah, it's just not scalable in the sense. It really doesn't make sense to scale it. It just spits off a lot of cash, and which is nice. But anyway, there's headaches there too. But the point is, it's funny actually. I'm trying to get away from it a little bit, but it keeps pulling me in. So.
I keep making all this money, and I just don't know what to do.
The funny thing is, I have this vendor I'm wrestling with, and like he is like trying to suck money out of my pocket. It's like the worst. It's evil. I can.
Let it out, right?
I don't want to talk about me, but this is what happens when I start talking about myself. Sorry. You can see what's up and like keeping me up at night. So. But anyway, and then this other project I'm working on was we have real technology. My co-founder developed for one of his projects. We're taking it out. We're going to universalize that and sort of make that commercially available, mature in the market. And we're doing customer development, lean startup. We're doing this schlep work. And it's like not always fun, right? It's in fact a lot of times it's not fun, but it's just like 9 women can't give birth to a baby in 1 month, right? Like we have this phase we're gonna go through where it's gonna be me knocking on a lot of doors, talking to people about their problems, how I perceive them, trying to understand their technical paradigm, and then if that seems to fit with ours, then perhaps adjusting ours as a solution, right? And Brand said this earlier, right? Like I need to understand them before I go in there pitching and hitting them like, you guys should buy this. I'm trying to understand their paradigm effectively.
That's the funnest part.
There's a lot of fun in it. It can also just be very like irritating and lame too. So I'm just trying to be honest. It's schlep work, but you got to do it, right? If you do
have to listen to people for
Tristan,
like hours.
Tristan, use your microphone.
Sorry, can I just yell at people?
No.
Fair enough.
So Tristan, you think that the schlep work is fun. It's the thing that you like the most.
I mean, as a relatively introverted people like you, I was kind of framed that after 3 days of conference networking. It's a nice excuse for me to go out and talk to people and really just listen to them and actually try and find a problem worth solving. Because I do like puzzles. I like to sit down and play chess. Those are the sort of challenges that engage me intellectually. But at the end of the day, it's not very emotionally satisfying. What is emotionally satisfying to me is seeing somebody and actually saying, like, okay, this person has a problem that I can, at least in theory, try and solve. And that's just such an incredibly gratifying thing that even if you can just solve it for one person, like even if it's what you call microfinance, or some people like derogatively call like a lifestyle business, I think that's incredibly satisfying. Even if it's something as simple as I'm going to cook a meal for somebody and really satisfy this person, I've solved their pain, their hunger pains.
You can come cook at my house anytime. My wife would love that.
So that's just, I think it's the emotional side of startups that we don't talk about very often. We don't talk about how do we scale and how do we get massive and how do we do that. But at some level, I need to be emotionally satisfied by what I'm doing, and that's a challenge in itself.
And have you done that have you treated Lean Startup Circle as a Lean Startup?
Yes, and that is somewhat painful sometimes.
Mike.
Yes, that is somewhat painful sometimes, particularly because it is a Lean startup and we do have to go through customer development. And it's a bizarre creature because I have entrepreneurs that we're trying to help. We also have Lean Startup Circle organizers that we're trying to help. Are you the Lean Startup Circle organizer in Chicago?
Yeah, my partners, yeah.
Awesome, I'm going to be pleased to meet you shortly. And so we have all these different entities and we have consultants that come in and want to kind of like, oh, can I talk at your group? And so we have all these different facets that kind of arrange in a completely nonprofit way, and that is the most challenging thing I think I've tried to do yet, and I have not unlocked it. So I'm not sure how to make a nonprofit a scalable, sustainable business, and that's still kind of challenging.
I'm gonna come back to the question of scalability as a defining characteristic of startups, but I want to not go there yet. So if we have time, we'll come back to that. And so Cindy, you're now at Microsoft, but I know that you were at Heaton's company from the very beginning.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, not the very beginning, but the last pivot, as it were.
So can you talk about kind of how do you know when it's time to pivot?
Well, in this case, I came in, he already knew, and he's kind of like, we have to get this right this time. So when I joined Kissmetrics, which was just about four years ago, he's like, you need to go out and figure out what it is that people need so that they will buy things, which is, really the customer development, it's an emotional connection. I totally agree with you, but I was just telling someone today, it's not a touchy-feely thing, it's a ruthless thing. You're doing this so that you can extract as much cash as possible from people, or else your company won't survive. So it was days of being on the phone every day. Well, how do you do this? Okay, what tools are you using? And part of the reason you ask that is to see what their problems are, and part is because you want to see what they've already shelled out money for, because that's a good indicator that they will give you money. But yeah, it's just a lot of even I am fairly extroverted. That's still kind of exhausting after days and days of doing that. But I think when you are talking to people and you're not getting a level of enthusiasm, that's a sign that you may not be as far along as a product that needs to pivot, but it's at least your ideas that need to pivot. If you're talking to people and they're saying things like, "Oh yeah, that would be nice," or "I know a lot of people who might like this," that means I don't like it, and it's really just a polite way of saying I really don't know anything with this, but I don't really ask.
And Cindy is writing a fantastic book about this and is almost published, yes.
Hopefully.
And what is the title of the book?
Lean Customer Development.
And is it being part of the O'Reilly series?
Yeah, it's part of the O'Reilly series. Yay! It's actually, it's available for early release, but it's not actually done yet, and I think it might be changing fair come out.
Mine too.
But it's very good. You should
I think that when you're a lean startup, in the early days, you have finite, there's finite room between here and there. And, we all call it runway, right? And runway runs out eventually. And you need enough shots on goal to get to an answer. And, how do you manage that kind of, it's like a teeter-totter. How do you manage that kind of stress, and how do you keep the pivots coming fast and furious enough to not die before your next fundraising cycle?
I think actually the four people you need on this panel are those two for this question.
Yeah, but that was a long time ago for them, and they barely remember it. So all of you advise early stage companies, right? And all of you have been with them for a long time and lived with this pain. And this is really where the rubber meets the road, right? It's like, how do we get our product far enough along that we don't die? So what advice is there for that situation, for those people?
Get comfortable with pain. I mean, I think this early stage stuff, like, I guess Tristan, he's right. It is sort of fun and sort of magical, and like you talk to one person, and also they tell you something and they blow you away. You're like, wow, this is a great opportunity here. But it is also agonizing at the same time. I feel like I'm not giving you really good directed advice that's useful, other than to comfort you. Like say, like if you're feeling pain, then you're probably doing it right? It should be stressful because it's stressful. You're giving birth to something theoretically innovative and new, and it turns out the world doesn't like that actually, and the world's sort of against you.
What does that mean? The world doesn't like it. You nodded, Cindy.
I was nodding. But,
Pain.
no, I think I was gonna say, riffing off of that is people should complain. You should be comfortable with people complaining. In fact, because the worst thing is people not complaining, because that means they don't care enough about your product. But I think a lot of us, what takes up so much time in building products is continuing to build on something that you haven't tested yet. This kind of sense of like, well, if we release it now, people will complain, so let's keep working on it, and then we'll test a better thing. That's where you're chewing up all of your runway. Whether it's money or development cycles, is saying, well, if we add this other feature, then people will like it. Like, no, if you built one or two features that really, really solve someone's problem, they will use it and complain, which is good. There's a Twitter conversation going on just this evening talking about people saying that, how do I test for product market fit? Like your MVP, your hypothesis is not about product market fit. It's about like, is this thing viable enough that it's worth continuing to work on? And that does mean that people are going to complain. They're going to like it. They're going to, this is crap. I use it every day, and I have no idea why you haven't added this thing. Good. Now you validated that you can add that thing, but you can't sit and be afraid of that complaint.
I think maybe the only thing that I can add is that I think you need to kind of get back to changing the definition of what done is to you. Like what is progress mean to you? And if you're the type of entrepreneur that every entrepreneur has a vision, but if your vision is for this piece of technology or this piece of solution, then you're kind of fucked by the lean startup. That we are being recorded.
That's okay. They can believe it.
But because what's Lean Startup doing? Lean Startup is taking you through the highs and lows of the startup, but at a rapid pace. So you're being constantly hammered by failure after failure, or success after success followed by failure after failure. So it's just like there's no winning. You're just going through it again and again. And it's incredibly painful at this incredibly rapid rate that human beings are not designed to withstand. Like we're not, it's like you have to break up with a girl every night.
Tweet that, somebody tweet that. Lean Startup, it's like having to break up with a girl every night.
But so what do? Like, can you change your internal definition of success? Because if your vision is attached to that product, to that technology, to that solution, then every rejection is a rejection of you. Okay? It's a rejection of you. And that of course hurts. And that's when you immediately start changing your startup strategy. You start saying, if people don't like it, maybe VCs will like it. And maybe I can just pitch my way out of this. Maybe I'll just pitch to my mom. And if I never show anybody but my mom, hopefully my mom has a lot of money. Then of course my ego feels incredibly gratifying. But if you can change that definition onto, are you learning something? Are you making progress? And if you really just love learning progress, and if you're willing to go out and get your ass kicked and handed to you and be like, that was awesome, I learned something really, really cool, and you have partners and friends in your team that are willing to suffer through that with you and be like, yay, let's have a group hug, we failed. Then you kind of have a chance of withstanding that emotional turbulence and sine wave.
So I completely agree with Tristan, right? This emotional roller coaster. So rationally, right? You talk to someone, and then turns out that they don't have this problem that you think they had. Rationally, they're not actually rejecting you. They just don't have this problem. Emotionally, it feels like they're rejecting you. And we all pretend, we're sort of macho and tough, and like it does affect you. I'm more sensitive to it now than ever before because I have children and I don't want to bring sort of that stuff home, right? So like, if I have a bad day, my kids shouldn't have a bad day, right? And so there's actually a great book called The War of Art by a guy named Stephen Pressfield. If you guys have never read that book, read that book immediately. It's a short little book. It talks about the resistance. And the resistance is effectively you, right? And it sounds sort of very kind of personal development, kind of
Little woo woo.
woo-woo, but it's actually, this book is fucking gold. Like, read this book as soon as possible. Because really it is you, right? And something actually Rob and I talked about too, but you can walk into any startup and you can see like the founder's soul painted on the walls. Actually, if you pay attention, right? And again, it shouldn't be you, but it is you, right? So like someone rejects you, it does hurt. Just a little bit.
You need people to talk to. I mean, and we had the roller coaster at Yammer, which is even a good sized company. We had a set of projects that were running. So 3 months launched, 29 A/B tests, and we actually launched to everyone 4 out of 29. And this was massively disheartening to all of our engineering team. Everyone worked really hard, and that's like an average of a test every 3 days, and most of them failed. And everyone was like, did we waste time? Was this crap? And it was like, no, to quote Thomas Edison, I mean, now we know 29 minus 4, 25 things that don't work. And so there's great learning because each of those had a hypothesis behind them. But I think, the lucky part of us being a bigger company is that we had a whole lot of people to reinforce that, yes, we did learn. But when you're a startup, it's lonely. You do have to find friends in startups to commiserate with, and they are having these same experiences. But it's tough on your own.
So how do you have those conversations, and with trust and confidentially and all that stuff? Like, aren't you afraid to like go tell people that like this is kind of killing me and like it really sucks? I mean, I pay Mercy to like, bring the tissues.
It's funny, when Brett and I were writing the book, and we were marketing the book for the pre-sales campaign, I remember like I was kind of down, we had tried some stuff, didn't work, and then we had a friend of ours, Jonas, who was sort of advising us. I remember Brett told us like, dude, just talk to Jonas, you'll feel a lot fucking better. And I did, and Jonas gave us great advice, but he's also this like source of energy for us. And so if you can find that, whether that's your spouse or your children or friends or alcohol, I don't care.
It doesn't work very well. You just wake up feeling worse.
The lucky thing is too, if you're an early stage startup and you talk about how you're failing, no one really cares. I mean, it's not going to be in like Pando Daily or Business Insider or anywhere. Like, it's just going to go. You're going to have one friend roll their eyes, and that's it.
Nobody cares.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll add to this that this is something that came up in customer development, probably in Startup Circle. And to that end, we started doing these peer-to-peer groups, which are just groups of 5 to 6 entrepreneurs sitting around the table. And we thought the value proposition initially was going to be learn lean startup, make your business move faster. And one of the value propositions was honestly just somebody to connect with. Like, is there somebody who understands my pain and can sympathize with that suffering together? And that is important to have that emotional outlet, otherwise you're not really going to get through this.
So I also wonder if sometimes we take the identity of being a startup founder too much, right? If you don't have anything else in your life, right? Something bad happens, right? It's like the end of the world, right? And so I actually think about this a lot because I'm a father and a husband. I go, you know what? I can't. It's like there's more to me than this. Again, like I have a 3-year-old and a 9-month-old. Just because I have a bad day, I can't bring it home with me. And so, if you have maybe if you're sports or so, there's got to be something else besides fucking startups.
Everyone have kids.
Yeah. I heard a great quote recently to summarize this, and maybe one of you remembers who said it. Don't put all of your emotional eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So if anybody remembers who said that, did you? Yeah, no. My husband was over there, so.
Traditionally, it was Jason for.
Yeah. My baby daddy, right?
So you guys you're brought in to advise and you're paid to help some startups. Is that right? In these advisory roles?
Startups don't have money.
Yeah, I don't.
No. Okay, that's what. Got it. So are you? Do they already know this pain when you're showing up? Or are you sort of helping them through it? I'm just kind of wondering when you're in that advisory role, are they coming to you to alleviate that pain, to commiserate with you? I'm just wondering kind of how you fit in with those.
Oh no, they come for the magic pixie nuts.
Right.
That's what they come for.
And how do you address that?
I pretend ignorance. Yeah, exactly.
Sprinkle it around.
I actually know what Tristan does. He says, I don't know, it depends.
Yes, that's exactly what I do.
Okay, so we're in the questions section now, so if y'all have any
Good job.
Yeah. questions? Yes.
My question is, I observe many people start with lean startup. You know, they're testing some assumptions, and then they get some initial traction and completely lose focus. And months go by, and suddenly they're back in, oh wait, what assumptions are we testing? What's going on here? Is that kind of typical? And are there great ways that you found that people work around that? Like, how do you beat that?
I know what I do. I know that I recommend people, but I don't necessarily know that it works all the time. It's just keeping a regular schedule of interaction with other entrepreneurs, like specifically two questions. Like two challenges. Well, I'm going to say this is what I'm doing this week, and they'll say why. And be like shit. And that kind of grounds me. So like I work with a guy called Spike Morelli. Spike Morelli in Sharethrough for like a year and a half now, and he's giving like, and he's my loyal loyal opposition. So he will challenge me, and when he does stuff, I challenge him, and so we kind of play that counterpart to each other. But also I try and go out and talk to other people and make sure that I'm not getting questioned on a regular basis.
So you built a system to ensure that, to keep you honest, basically.
Yes, and it's in my calendar. So that's important to schedule that pivot or persevere. So that's my habit.
So is pivot or persevere the only form that this takes? That this kind of, it's almost like an abandonment, like you think you're on the right track, so you kind of let it go? Sort of the process?
You decide you're mostly on the right track,
Okay.
and then you become distracted with, oh, well, now something's happening, there's customers, and, you know, it's no longer about a theoretical MVP, it's about communities, it's about a thing that's now in the marketplace. There's so many distractions in actually working with customers that they kind of fall off the startup bandwagon and just get to like, now we're building a thing.
What I've seen is I've seen that happen, and I've seen founders get really excited as they should, and then if it's a sort of first time founder, they often don't understand how hard distribution is, and then that's usually where some of the assumption testing that they should be doing like just falls to the wayside. And that's like, oh shit, what are they like? Okay, we've got these customers happy. Now what? Oh shit, how many more of these people, right? And my sense is that you go through that cycle once or twice. I made those mistakes, same thing. And that's sort of the talk I did at Lean Startup is sort of about distribution at some level of channels. It's something I spent a lot of time thinking about. And I think maybe just experience, right? You just gotta get punched in the face a few times, and then after a while it hurts, and then you're like, maybe that's not a good idea.
Hopefully you still have some money after getting punched in the face.
So Lean Startup is basically about like trying to save as much time. At what point does it become where you're validating just too much? Is there like a point, you're wasting a lot of time validating nonsense stuff, or is that?
Could be.
Yeah.
It's possible.
It depends. Actually, I see that quite often. Actually, I see like people go, "I'm doing this thing. It's like people can get together and buy stuff for half off." I'm like, "Oh, it's like Groupon." Kind of, but not really. And it's like it's effectively the same. Like I'm gonna MVP this thing. I'm like, you don't have to MVP it. Groupon fucking works. Like,
Or it doesn't.
I don't think it's that. It's not like they're validating it's not like they're running too many experiments. It's that they're running experiments on the wrong thing. So like when you're launching your MVP and your first A/B test is whether it should be a green button or a red button, what are you doing? Like it doesn't make any sense.
it's a form of the resistance.
So it's a little ardent back here.
Cindy, how do you decide what to test?
Our focus on testing something is basically, so, you know, at Yammer I run a team of user researchers and product designers, and then there's a guy who's my peer who runs data analysts, and both of us consider it our job to you know, kind of be that obnoxious person and say like, if you got these A/B test results back, what would you do with them? And that is actually a good stopping point. It's like, you know, if you tested the red or green button, what would you learn? That in this exact context with this shape of button on this page, red works. That's crap. You shouldn't be wasting time on that. So, you could set up something and say, well, we could test these 2 variations. Like, are those really big enough to make a difference? What will you learn? So, it might be valid to say, we're going to test a 3-step registration process versus a 1-step one. Okay, that's a pretty big difference in, the amount of time people have invested in something. Maybe you learn that if something is really fast, sign up, it works, and if it's slower, that doesn't, that gives you a little sense of like how people are approaching. But if you can't crisply answer based on these results, I think I will do this, then it's too small.
Next question.
Thank you guys so much for coming and talking. What are your favorite tactics to getting past the customer being really nice to you when you're talking to them and getting past the bullshit and getting them to give you real honest and maybe uncomfortable answers? How do you get there?
So, to start, don't ask people about your product, even if you have one. If at all possible, especially in your early stage, you don't have a ton of customers, don't ask people about this thing you built. Ask them about a problem they have, and don't say that you're building. I'm not the one building electronic dog leashes, because then they're going to only say nice things about that. Ask about how they walk their dog and what problems they have along there. If people are being especially polite, and this can be cultural, this can be just depending on who you're talking to. I like to suggest bringing up the mythical "other people have told me that." Just make this up. Other people have complained about blah blah blah, and this gives giving them permission to complain, and so they tend to. But in general, focusing people towards a narrative is another good thing also, because if you're asking, how much do you like this? How likely would you be? Those are very polite, seeking answers. How likely would you be to buy, blah, blah, blah. Of course, you're going to say yes. Tell me about the last time you did this. Tell me about what happened when this event took place. Is going to give you something that's more procedural and more honest.
Also talk about money, make things really uncomfortable, but that's kind of where you want to be. So I actually did this with a really big company in Hollywood a few weeks ago. I was like, what does your buying cycle look like, right? Oh, you guys are using this? How much do you guys pay for this? And the guy on the other side of the table was like very uncomfortable. But I got some good data out of him, right? I'm serious, like if you really wanted to, but I need to know those things. I really need how do they view their purchasing decision? Right? Where is it in their technical paradigm, in their stack, do they view this? Is it an important bottleneck? How do they think about this? It got really weird. You feel weird. Why is this guy asking? I don't really want to answer this question, but I can't really evade him. But that's
Were you standing over the table like this?
I wasn't, but it was funny actually. I was thinking about this thing. I was actually thinking about the dynamics. There was my co-founder, myself, and then the table, and then we're sitting. So we're sitting across from them, which is an oppositional sort of thing, right? I would actually, if you could manipulate the room, sit next to someone is probably better, because you're on the same team then, like Tristan and I, right? We're talking about this stuff, probably a little bit less weird. Yes. Yeah. But the point is, it was uncomfortable. It was even uncomfortable for me, but that's why I got the fucking meeting, so I could learn about his fucking buying process and get money out of his pocket.
So this is the ruthless thing again.
It's not ruthless, it's business. If I create value.
Similarly, what can work is kind of sending in either the person with the least threatening job title or the least physically threatening person. So, not you. You just said me.
So Cindy gets better results than
right. No, I come in and I'm like, yeah, I'm a product manager. And they're like, oh, well, you're not trying to sell me anything. People are very honest to me because they don't think I'm going to ask them for a check. And it's true, I'm not going to today. I just will next week after we've built it. But,
I'll ask for a check before we build it. That's the difference.
But asking about money when someone perceives you as not a person who's going to then ask for it can be helpful. You can then trick them and ask for money, but just set it up in the non-threatening way.
But I wouldn't concentrate on optimizing it. Who cares? Sometimes you screw up. We actually made this big mistake. I'll tell you a mistake we made just recently. We did the equivalent of dunking on our potential customers. The equivalent, like my co-founder dunked and showed his engineering chops. Boom, sucker, you can't dunk. It was actually really stupid, right? Because we didn't do it intentionally. We did it because we were talking about their technical paradigm. They asked a very super detailed question, and my co-founder responded oh no, you don't have to do any of that stuff. Here's what we do, and he thought I'm showing you magic. But the way it was interpreted was my co-founder's got a bigger dick than that guy, right? So even if though our technology is better, we just hurt that guy's feelings. That's not good. You guys follow me here?
Yeah.
Right? So don't dunk on your potential customers. Turns out it's bad. Turns out people don't like being made fun of, right? Not that he wanted to do that, but he was so excited. And I'm So we actually had to talk about this. Like, so if we understand a code paradigm here, how do we bring them to ours? And we do it slowly and sort of subtly, sort of what Cindy's approaching. We don't just go smash suckers. We're so much better than you. Sounds obvious, but I made that mistake. So.
There's one other tip that I can't remember either Janice or Cindy's blog post or somebody told me, probably somebody in the room told me, is if you really have a problem and you wind up talking about your product, pretend it's off-brand, it's somebody else's product.
Yeah.
And that really helps because it's like, oh, I'm really concerned about my friend is building this crazy thing about this problem. Do you have that problem? And people will be very honest with you.
I think we have time for one more question. Who's going to take it? Right up.
I have 2 questions.
Nice! Ruthless!
A, how do you know what to focus on every day? Because there's a million different things that I could be doing. And 2, how do you know the best place to find what you should be learning? Because often I'll be going through, whatever, and I'll know some of those things, and other things I won't. But is there like a resource? Is that a mentor? Is there a specific place that you go to find out that don't know that you don't know?
What was the first
I think everybody would say another person, but I would disagree with the mentor. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, you don't need Eric Ries to come in and tell you which is your riskiest assumption. Like probably there's a very smart person that you know that is a peer who can see your blind spot. Like your blind spots are super obvious to everybody else. They're just not obvious to you. And they're your blind spots, so just get somebody else, and that certainly helps. And I like to use some version of the business model canvas just to say, like, if I walk into my room and there's something there where I wrote that riskiest assumption down and I'm doing stuff and I'm doing my taxes, and I can at least look up if my taxes are necessary. I have to do them, right? But I can look up and go, this really doesn't get me there, so I can just acknowledge that and set aside time and do something that propels me forward today.
And is that how you determine what to focus on as well? Looking at that canvas and seeing which are your biggest goals?
For focus, I like to suggest that if you could only do one thing, what would it be? And maybe you can do them for up to 3. For up to 3, you can say, there's absolutely only 3 things, we're going to die at the end of 3 things, what would they be? And that works whether you're early stage or I bring that into folks at Microsoft a lot too, because they, of course, want to design 10 billion things. Like if you had one engineer in one day, what would you build? And amazingly, something rises to the top, and it's actually a pretty good thing.
Also, this feels a little bit like premature optimization, right? Which has been said to be the root of all evil, right? There's so many things you could be focusing on, and like don't beat yourself up about it. Like, oh, I didn't focus on that one thing. Like it's already stressful enough, right? This is kind of back when I said when we started this. There's all this like schlepping you have to do at early stage. There's like a million fucking things you have to do, and they all have to get done, and someone's got to do them. It's probably you. And so, I'm serious. Like, just gotta get through it. And if you're like spending hours thinking about what's the one thing you did, there's like hours you didn't spend doing something. I've made this mistake. I continue to make this mistake all the time. So.
If there's one other thing you could mention, if you really have trouble prioritizing the top 3 things that you should do, and you've still got a list of 10 things, figure out the least important thing to do and throw that away, and then figure out the least important thing to do and throw that away. And somehow that's much easier.
Okay, last word. Last piece of advice for anyone kind of starting a company, early stage.
Find a really skeptical person and tell them about your idea.
Oh, that's a good one.
Find something to say I don't know about every day.
So I'm gonna take a different tack with this one. So I'm clearly an advocate for lean startup and customer development, all those things. But I said this last year at the conference to some friends. Now this has become a big herd. Eric Ries has created a big herd. It's very good in a lot of ways. Right? There's a bunch of us now. We meet together and talk, and we derive the same conclusions independently. Look at the same data. That's comforting. That's interesting. But you can also, like a herd, which are blinded also, right? So I would advocate, I would encourage you to just keep your eyes open. Like there's multiple paradigms, there's multiple ways to solve any problem. Lean startup happens to be a pretty good one. It happens to be one I like, I employ, I advocate for. But like, just that's not a fucking religion, right? So good luck.
Yeah.
All right, let's thank them.